Neighborhood services, and is there anything you would like to introduce?
No.
Or just you guys go ahead and get started? Thank I think we'll start with zoning enforcement.
Council, good morning, and my name is Chris Helsko. I'm the Zoning Enforcement Officer. This is a continuation for our Neighborhood Services workshop we started on October 20th, convening this morning, and we're going to tackle zoning enforcement, which I'll present, and Chris Johansson will finish off with our housing department. So zoning enforcement is kind of uniquely positioned at the crosshairs of balancing our kind of a pro-business development environment with abating nuisances that are affecting our citizens and our neighbors. As an overview, there's enabling, we'll call it legislation or codes, where we pay homage to those individuals that have given us guiding principles in our zoning ordinance. The mayor, council, a lot of planning staff have gone into developing these plans, and it's our job to enforce those. So those are just a list of some of those ordinances out there and comprehensive plans. Next, we'll get into how zoning enforcement is organized. We've got field staff, 5 field staff, and 1 person in the office who's an inspector who's issuing permits and licenses. We also have an administrative assistant and myself on our staff. So we're a smaller group, a little more maybe nimble than other departments, but nonetheless very busy.
Hey, Chris,
Yes.
can you go back to the previous slide? How does it work for the 5? It looks like, are those corridors that?
Yeah, to get into the details there, and maybe this graphic isn't the best, we have 2 corridor inspectors, one on the north side of town, generally divided by the rivers throughout the community, and then on the south side of town. So they're going to run our major corridors, commercial districts, and handle a lot of our liquor license sign-offs, tobacco license sign-offs, site plan, redevelopment of any commercial sites. And then we have 3 that interact within the neighborhood, and those are probably the questions you guys all get the most calls on, the home occupations, how we're affecting the citizens. And then we have 1 person inside the office who's tasked with issuing all of our permits and licenses.
So are we aggressively looking for violations on those corridors, or we have the same complaint-based like we do in the neighborhoods? Or
Yeah.
kind of switched
Right.
over?
We'll kind of get into that a little bit more, but generally speaking, our workload is reactive and complaint-based. There's a few small tasks that we handle proactively. We would like to be more proactive, but there's enough complaints that are keeping our staff hopping every day. We're just showing some before and after photos here and the importance of our city zoning code and what enforcement looks like on the back end, affecting the aesthetic of the community. And an overview of our enabling legislation here is Chapter 134, which is primarily our uses, what can go where throughout the community. And then Chapter 135, our DS staff does the review and approval on a lot of the site plans, and we go out and we're the enforcement arm for the city of Des Moines. As you move down the list, transient merchants, mobile vendors, that's Chapter 78. That's another code we enforce. There's about 67 licensed, and we all know there's some out there that aren't probably licensed, and that's what we're looking for. And with those transient merchants, typically on private property, we're going to have a premise permit. So the owner of the property must obtain that through our partners in the city clerk's office. We enforce noise control in Chapter 42, and that is in conjunction with our police department. Typically after hours, if somebody is disturbing the peace, there's a police call made, and we would need the sound readings on those to enforce.
So what happens? So I have this happening consistently. I get an email every weekend, and I think I pass it on to you. Do you have to organize the police to go out there, or is there someone on dispatch that has that reading, or is there only just certain people that can do it?
Yeah, so a lot of things can happen there. Typically, there's communication between Lieutenant Stroop and myself and NBSD. We also partner with Lieutenant Santizo if businesses are creating a disturbance. If they're not following the ordinance and we need sound readings, that's something we try and organize with our police department. If they don't get the readings, we really don't have a case. Yes, they have the equipment, they're certified, and that's kind of how the process works. We're not out there at 2 a.m. when somebody's causing some kind of discontent in the neighborhood.
Well, we'll talk later, because I've got continuous emails that they call dispatch and nobody does anything.
Yeah, and if we receive a complaint, we can take somebody back for their liquor license back in front of the board for reconsideration.
I get it, but nobody has gone out to test them yet. So we'll talk about that later before you leave.
Yes.
Okay.
And also with Chapter 42, that is something that Dalton's Area Neighborhood Inspections handles. That's junk and debris. But we will collaborate with their department and tie that into our illegal use cases as well. So we are set up and equipped to deal with, if we get a favorable ruling in the court, to remove any junk and debris at a home occupation or any kind of illegal business materials and equipment storage at a residential property. That's a big one. So we can tie that into our notice as well. And signs and fences are Chapter 134, Section 5, and fences. We also do things like solar review, and we staff our zoning board of adjustment. We advise the zoning board of adjustment from an enforcement standpoint. A lot of these cases that come before and are heard at the zoning board of adjustment have enforcement happening in the background. This is a list of duties the zoning department is tasked with. It's pretty comprehensive here. The first one, I listed them somewhat in priority of order, and those are investigating complaints of illegal land use. That would be your home occupations, your backyard mechanics, storage, running a roofing company out of a residential property, all those type of things, or maybe something on a commercial corridor where they have expanded beyond allowable use or there's a site plan violation. So secondly is our business license inspections. That's our liquor license and our tobacco licensing. That's pretty high frequency and a heavy lift. There's a lot of them around town, and they need a lot of review. Review and permitting of signs and fences. That is something our inside staff takes care of. We review all the signs and issue permits on them and make sure that they're built structurally sound and engineered. Sometimes there's a building department review on those if necessary. We want to make sure those are safe and follow the ordinance. Fences, same way. There's some design standards there. There's relief that can be offered to our citizens and our fence builders. And then a review of our building projects and site plans. We'll issue a certificate of zoning compliance or a CO if it's a new project. Pretty important on the back end. Everybody wants to get their money released, and we're the final step. And those, remember, have already had all the trades through them. Our DS staff has reviewed and done inspections, and then we come out and make sure they've met the site plan elements and requirements in Chapter 134 and 135. Review and issuance of administrative, issuing zoning verification letters. That would be, say, a realtor, an appraiser calls in, just wants to know the zoning district. That's something that we produce. It's a legal document. Again, a high touch point for the department. Those don't take a lot of time, but that's something that we're sending out daily. And then the next one is our review and issuance of administrative zoning approvals. We call those, another government acronym here, AZON cases. That's something fairly new in the last few years. So if you think back on some events, maybe the Harkin Center recently held an event, needed a temp use approval, that's something that would come through our office and would get reviewed and approved. Investigation of complaints on commercial sites, fences and signs in disrepair. Those are obsolete signs. Fences that are falling down. We get a lot of complaints on neighbors complaining about their neighbor's fence, and we'll go out and investigate those. I like to say it's maybe more than 50% in disrepair, but we can kind of review those on case-by-case basis. If you're getting those calls, forward them over to us, and we can go out and make a review on them. Review of the transient merchant mobile vendors. All of those need a premise permit. When you see those set up, they need to follow the rules and guidelines in Chapter 78. Again, we'll bring them in for a hearing if they're violating the ordinance in some manner. If their premise permit is not valid and their transient merchant permit is not valid, we can move right on to a civil infraction on those locations. Zoning review for pre-applications. I think I remember Cody's presentation. There was 350 odd pre-apps. On all of those, we're making a zoning determination, sometimes formal or informal, as we lead up to those meetings. Street use committees will issue sound permits, and again, sound permits for special events throughout the community. General zoning inquiries, can I put a barber shop or a dog groomer in this location or throughout the community? So those, again, are not extremely difficult, and they don't require the research, but they're very high frequency. Addressing assignment, I'm the addressing administrator for the city. In that role, I think we've done maybe over 200 addresses, but that is not just me. We have another person, Jillian Summer, who also assigns addresses in the community. She's one of our planning staff, does a fantastic job, and we staff up a committee with our fire department, EMS 911, engineering, traffic and transportation. So it's kind of one of those duties that maybe not everyone sees, but requires a lot of review. Here's our zoning by the numbers. We've had 763 new zoning enforcement cases since that would be September of 24 to September of 25. All of our zoning inspections, that's re-inspections included, entries into the database, there's 3182. I believe when we think back on other neighborhood services presentation from Dalton, they've done, I don't want to undershoot this, but it was probably 500 to 700 abatements. We use the same contractor, the same public works crew, and we've done about 70. So you can see the length of time of cases is there's a significant difference there. We have to get a court order and get a permanent injunction to try and go out and abate those. The burden is very high on zoning enforcement cases. We like to say Dalton is the quick strike and can go in and clean them up. When they've done it a few times, then we'll go out and we're in kind of the trenches for the long haul. There's some of our zoning letters that we've produced, address assignments, transient merchants, permits, review, and that's an inspection. Every one of those items requires an inspection. Temporary right-of-way signs really didn't make our top 10 list. Those are prohibited sign types. So there shouldn't be any signs out in the right-of-way. The small signs, big signs, whatever, they're extremely dangerous, and traffic and transportation has said they don't want them out there, so we're enforcing them. I think we'll be at over 600 probably by the end of the year. But it's something that's quick. If you're a corridor inspector, you can stop, pull over, grab those signs, get rid of the blight, clean them up. I know several of you were around in the early 2000s, and that was a huge ask by the council and the mayor at that time. Here's some of our numbers for liquor license review. Fences, a lot of fences being built. And the 533 there for certificates of occupancies, those are new homes, those are review of site plan submittals, those are new businesses going in, and any subsequent re-inspections. So if there's something that needs a temp CO that may need an extension through October, November of a year, their planting isn't quite complete, we'll give them till the following spring to get those things completed, but that's another inspection for staff. There's our liquor licenses. Administrative use approvals, those are those ASON cases I mentioned, and our sound permits. I guess that's a good sign of a growing and thriving, vibrant community when you see a lot of special events happening. You may get those calls and complaints when something steps outside the lines. And then our sign permit review. Here's some before and after. This individual on the left was storing pallets, running some sort of pallet and trailer storage and manufacturing there at a residential property. And that's what it looks like after our city crews go out and abate. They do a fantastic job. Craig Shepard and Chris Brookhart have a great team that has a lot of knowledge and experience. They know what to take and what not to take when they're on location. Pretty impactful when you think about that affecting neighbors and the calls you might get. Hopefully you're armed with some information here today to get them to us. You may all be familiar without using addresses here. When we talk about length of time for enforcement here, this case took our inspector 8 years to gain compliance. The individual's an attorney and was represented by an attorney. It was a long battle, exhausted every appeal through the court system that's known, and we prevailed and have a permanent order. So huge. This started long before me coming in, so it's a credit to our staff and former administration for seeing this through. I was involved on the back end, but that's many court battles, many mediations going back and forth on this. But again, it speaks more to the time and length and due diligence of the case than it does, it's not an expedient process here when people exhaust their appeals.
Chris, so going back to the pallet story, what argument could you make that this wasn't?
Generally, their argument was they had legal nonconforming status.
Well, right, they what?
They had legal nonconforming status and wanted the judge to weigh in on that and really put his finger on the scale. So in other words, maybe grandfather rights. That's our term, the vernacular for grandfather rights is legal nonconforming. So they received a fine for this through the court system, and every time we go out and we remove all these pallets, it's an enormous bill. I think our city crew is at about $400 an hour, and I think it should be more because they do such a great job, but they're put in really tough situations with a police officer and the tow driver. This had a little bit of everything on it. It's extremely difficult. But again, a success story that we want to share. Moving on to our, just a little discussion on timeline. And this one really should be labeled setting expectations. And so you're armed with information as citizens call, why does zoning take so long? How come they're not out there? Typically, we will go out and adhere to about a 24-hour turnaround on opening a case. And then we like to be on site within 72 hours. And that sounds like a long time, but our field inspectors do rotate through the counter duty. So if they're not out in the field that day, it may go a weekend, we may extend that a little. We typically are out there in about 48 hours. And as we move through, a complaint comes in, we'll build a case. And that doesn't mean that we're going to move immediately to a notice. We have to abide by curtilage restrictions. So we may need neighbors to be a partner in this, where we go out and ask them, hey, can we come into your backyard? We can no longer go down driveways and just walk onto property. We need to be invited, or we have to gain evidence somehow. So that's usually through neighbors, or maybe from the public right away. But it's that if we don't see it, when we go out in that 72-hour window, we have to reschedule that. So that gets bumped for another 2 weeks down the road. It's kind of why there isn't a national standard on metrics for zoning enforcement. There is for other types of code enforcement. But success for us looks like an abatement, a successful win in court, and then that subsequent abatement. So we'll send out a 30-day notice. And in that notice, we have to provide relief through our different boards and commissions. That could be the Planning and Zoning Commission or the Zoning Board of Adjustment, working on a group home right now where they are going to exhaust the ability to go and rezone their property. So there is the potential there, before we can even move that over into the legal world, that they would get a favorable or get it denied at a board or commission.
How many people do you have doing all this? How many inspectors?
We have 6 inspectors.
The 6 that,
Yep.
okay, for all of them. Okay.
And one clerical staff person or administrative assistant who helps with the research. So after we've resolved all the appeals and we've built a substantially sound case, and it has to be sound, it can't be, say, cars driving down a driveway that a neighbor sends in. That isn't enough for a conviction. We would have to see things like tow trucks or advertisement where they're doing auto repair. So the standard is pretty high, and the judges have set that bar for a reason, to protect personal property rights. So it isn't, we get the frustrated citizen, well, I know they're doing this. I know this is happening. And it's our job then to go and sit at the property and see what we can observe. If we can't, we have to keep moving on to the next one and the next priority on our list. So it isn't a stakeout situation typically, like maybe our police department has a resource to do that. Their days are full. They have to keep moving from, if they bump one complaint, it gets bumped to the next day. So as we move through that, we get if a reinspection occurs after the 30 days, there's no appeal, then we can turn it over to our legal department, and they do a fantastic job. I won't spend a lot on the legal timeline. They're extremely busy. If you can imagine all of Dalton's and Dan's and our cases coming through from NS, there's a lot of court filings, and they do a great job. And we typically aren't waiting on our legal team to do something. We're waiting on the courts and due process. And that may mean service to someone. If they're dodging service, we just had one where an individual dodged our service. So that delayed our action by another 2 to 3 weeks before we could get that to even to file. So once they received service, there's a 30 to 45 day window. So I think you probably get the gist of the length of time there. And that can be, I hope it's 3 to 4 months on the short end. But that's a very, very quick turnaround. It's usually more like 8 or 9 months. We'll get a win. Once, the important one here is number 7, is the judge issues the order. Then we immediately schedule that. It goes to the top of the list. This is the one time zoning gets to go first. We've been waiting all this time. The citizens have been waiting patiently. You all have been waiting patiently. We get the order, and then we can turn that over immediately to our cleanup crew, and it will be done the next day. I just attended a cleanup a week ago today at a problem property in Riverbend. We were there from 7:30, I think, till 10, and Dalton and I were both on site, checking on the crew, seeing how they're doing, and they're doing a great job. I just can't commend them enough. It's a very difficult job when you have somebody coming out screaming at you for 4 or 5 hours straight. This speaks to the timeline again of appeal process. That once we send notice, or not, this is kind of where things go to get approval. We can either go to district court, or they can get relief through the Zoning Board of Adjustment or Planning and Zoning. And that's what compliance looks like. You can see the time frames there and timelines. That's what we shoot for. I would say in the first 2 columns, probably all of those were usually under 7 days, which is pretty standard or typical for permit issuance. Every once in a while, in our building department partners will let us know if we're lacking something in the middle column, but we're not perfect. But we aim to hit those metrics on all of our reviews. Zoning determinations are, again, that's a legal document we're producing from our department that goes out and can be challenged at the Zoning Board of Adjustment. I've had one, I sat through when Eric was in this role, sat through one of his, and it creates a lot of research. There's a lot of research that goes into prevailing in those cases. Somebody can contest our opinion and our view. Again, boat storage, illegal contractors, equipment, material storage, and that's what it looks like after the crew is done. Some additional ones. A lot happening on the sign code front. Recently met with members of council in small groups and wanted to talk about how we're enforcing our lit signage policy. We changed that. We went back to the strict adherence to the code. I think that had maybe slipped a little bit, and I'm happy to report if you drive up and down some of our major corridors, a lot of our vendors and retailers are changing those out. We also produced some education literature and went door to door on some of our substantial, what we'll call violators. They didn't know they were in violation because we'd signed off on them. So that's been a huge improvement. I think we probably handed out 50 different educational flyers, and just driving around the neighborhood, I saw 20 that have changed back, and that can affect their license, tobacco license. Proposed pole sign allowance, that is to make it a little easier for business owners to change out some electronic readers. And that says proposed, that has been adopted. And our electronic multivision center signage allowance, that was in the works, and you'll see those in practice out at Casey's Event Center and probably at the Ingersoll Dinner Theater coming up. There's some pictures. It's fully lit up now. I think that's been a welcome addition to the community. Here's just some other signs that are in the right of way that we're stopping and removing. Here's what we have coming up. Looking back over the past year and looking to 2026, some of the things and projects we're working on. Again, another acronym, my apologies. ZCOM is zoning communication. Those are for rebuild letters, DOT letters, zoning letter, and a zoning determination communication. Those are sort of we call our big four. There are high touch points in the department. They're legal documents. We're putting those so citizens can apply for those online. I think that'll be a huge help and maybe be a little bit more efficient. A lot of people have transferred over to using the CSS portal. A lot of our contractors, developers, our real estate agents are familiar with that process now. In our coordination with NBSD and detectives and PD, we are doing conference calls weekly with Lieutenant Stroop, Lieutenant Santizo, and Undercover Department. One thing we're working on is an automation to send them all the sound permits starting on Thursday evening to Third Watch. And I've been just kind of creating a list there, but we want to do that with an automation. So they know who should produce a sound permit. If they don't produce the sound permit, they can be in violation, and those sound readings that Joe had mentioned can be taken. So it's an easier way for them they don't have to go into our system. Police department and beat cops don't have to go into our system, and we'll share that information automatically with them. Centralize all our research links. I got to give Dalton credit for this. When I was in that area. That's one of the first things Dalton did was centralize all of the documentation, training materials in our SharePoint. Seems like a small thing, but for us, research is key. You can have a whole binder full of research, and this is a central place for a new employee or existing employees to go in and look for all of our resources. We want to continue to improve our data collection from EnerGov. That's our database to establish higher level of customer service. Again, anything we can do to make us more transparent throughout NS is important to us. And if we're seeing something that's falling behind, maybe backlog cases, we want to make sure we're responsive to those. All of our staff is certified in ICC. That's a national governing body for inspectors. Develop a 500-foot buffer for our GIS. That is for the new tobacco and vape shops that we met with a lot of you on and got feedback, and that we're moving forward with enforcement on those and expand our counter backup. So there isn't a fall off between if our counter person is out of the office, vacation sick, we aren't going to skip a beat. And then just, again, using technology to its fullest capacity. They're equipped with iPads and they can take pictures in the field and upload notes. So here's a few examples of site plans before and after, some common sites you're probably all familiar with. You see the landscaping requirements have been installed. That is fully signed off, CO issued. And with that, I'll close and answer any questions you may have.
I just want to say thank you. Your department and everything that you do, you are so responsive. And you and Dalton, I mean, it's amazing the response and how wonderful you and your department and the rest of the team are. So thank you. I know it's a hard job, and you take my calls, you answer my emails, and it's really made a huge difference. It's a great improvement.
Well, and to that, we understand that you're getting the same calls we are. So we want to lift that burden off of you and get you back to the subject matter experts so you're not burdened with being responsive to the citizens. So we appreciate that.
Yeah, you do a great job. And Eric did a great job before, but it's just now it's like the whole team is all together, and it's really great.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Again, thank you for the presentation. It gives us a better understanding of the work you do and the load that you have. It's not easy, so
All right.
I appreciate it.
And Chris Johansson will finish up the NS presentation with housing.
Okay.
Good morning, Chris Johansson, Neighborhood Service Director, here to talk about the Des Moines Municipal Housing Agency. So today, going to talk a little bit about public housing, our Section 8 program, and our family self-sufficiency program. First, start off with public housing. Public housing is the program where we serve as the landlord, just like in a regular landlord tenant environment. We own the unit. The tenant will pay up to 30% of their income towards rent, and that difference in the rent and the rent we collect and the cost to operate the program is subsidized by operating fund subsidy of about $1 million from HUD every single year. And then we also get a $1 million capital fund grant from HUD every year to handle the major improvements to the units. So for public housing, we have 410 total units currently. 390 of those are in 5 apartment buildings. The remainder are all in single-family homes. So those 20 single-family homes are divided into 3 different categories. There's one that's in an approved Section 18 disposition program. In that program, we're selling those homes directly to Habitat for Humanity. And Habitat for Humanity is rehabbing and selling those for home ownership. So in that program, we've already sold 9. There's going to be another 3 that will be coming in front of council probably in the spring. And then there's 1 remaining unit that's still occupied that we're working through relocation with the family on right now. The second program is our Section 32 Affordable Home Ownership Program. So this is a program where we directly work with the family that lives in the unit. So these are longtime public housing residents. 4 or 5 years ago, when I met with all of our families that lived in the single-family units, we were seeing which ones were curious in home ownership, and then which ones were more interested in getting a Section 8 voucher and using relocation and just rent in another unit. So these family members, they all raised their hand, said they wanted to work towards purchasing their home. So far we've sold 5. There's still 9 that are remaining in the program that we're working through home ownership. There's going to be a few that have changed their mind throughout the process. So those we're going to be able to put on the market and take applications from anyone. We first have to offer to anyone in our Section 8 program, and then it's open to anybody on the street that meets our income guidelines. The last category is there's 7 remaining single-family homes, and back 4 or 5 years ago when I met with all the family members, they really weren't in a position where they really knew what they wanted to do. So we told them we'd give them a couple years, circle back with them. And so there was a number that we did go through some relocation with just recently, and there's I think it's 2 or 3 that do want to pursue home ownership. So coming in the spring of next year, there'll be an amendment to our Section 32 home ownership program where we'll be adding these 7 added homes to that program as well.
With these homes, could you talk about how this kind of relates to our community land trust and permanent affordability?
These were excuse me, both of these programs were approved by HUD before the land trust got up and running, so they're not required to go into the land trust. The 7, and it could be 8, I need to clarify that, where we're going to be amending the application, those we are going to ask to put into the land trust. That does need approval by HUD. They have to approve everything and the way we sell it. So that is one thing we are going to ask.
So the ones that were done prior to the land trust, is there permanent affordability required for them?
Yes. So for each of these, so for our home ownership program specifically, we sell the homes at 75%, 67% of fair market value. So we hold a 33% second mortgage. And on top of that, a lot of these are eligible for our Section 8 home ownership program. So with that, they receive Section 8 assistance towards their mortgage, and that usually goes for at least 10 years. But there's only a 7-year forgivable on the affordability period for the home ownership.
Right. So there's not permanent.
Not permanent. It's not permanent. It's not permanent.
And there's no way
You
to retroactively go back on those others. I mean, anything that isn't in the program yet, I mean, I would think we want to put that in the community land trust, right?
Right, those 8 that will be amending the application, definitely. If you want me to go back to HUD and ask, we can. I mean, government shut down now, and hopefully when they're up and running again, we go back and ask. It will delay the program probably 6 to 9 months. So,
right, but I mean, we're taking these out of affordability. And which program would it delay? I mean, the other 4 and 9 single-family homes, I mean, there are 20 units. Those should all be in the land trust if we dispose of them, right?
The ones we're selling to Habitat is pretty much permanent affordability. The ones that aren't would be the Section 32.
Okay. And what do we have with Habitat that guarantees the permanent affordability?
HUD requires, I believe it's 15 years affordability, but Habitat's program by nature is pretty much permanent affordability.
I mean, I guess I'd want to unpack that a little bit because I thought, I mean, folks get control of their home with Habitat as well, right? So is there a requirement if they sell it that it remains affordable?
I believe Habitat has a right of first refusal on those. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the ones in question, to answer your question, the Section 32 homeownership program is not permanent affordability. But I know with the ones we're amending, we're definitely going to ask for that, though. The land trust. Yeah.
And are there any others that, I mean, so there's 16 total. There are 9 that that are in process. So the 7 that we are amending, we're going to ask to go in the land.
Yes, yeah.
But the other 9, we are not. Is that?
The other 9 have already been approved. It was approved several years ago. We'd have to go back and amend the application if you want to make that change.
And the families understand that
Right,
they're going to receive these properties.
right. Right now, the ones.
They don't want to change that messaging to those,
Yeah.
want to go back and make
those
them wait
families.
9 months.
Well, they haven't finished the program, right?
True.
It's indicated, at least if I was listening, there's several of these that are anticipated to come out of the program as well.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
So would they go back into that 7 count, and that 7 count would go up? Or what would happen if, I mean, you said that not everyone goes through
Right.
and completes the program.
Those that are in the 9, there's some that are occupied, and there's families we're working with right now. They know the program, they know the deal right now. There's a small handful, 3 or 4, that are vacant. So those we don't have a buyer for right now. So you could change those if you wanted
3
to.
or 4 in the 9.
In the 9.
So if there are 3 or 4 that are vacant in the
Yep.
9,
Yep.
why don't we put those in the program for permanent affordability?
We can, if that's what you're directing me to do.
I mean, it seems like I don't want to interrupt anyone who's down the
Yeah,
process.
yeah.
But if we have 3 or 4 homes that are vacant and we would just sell them and they wouldn't require permanent affordability otherwise, I mean, this seems like a perfect
Do
opportunity
you have to
get
have
those
approval
3
by
or
HUD
4.
for
Yes.
all of it? So
Yes.
it's, I mean, if HUD approves it, they would get the request.
Right, but let's at least go through the effort. I mean, this is a good opportunity to get that into the, I mean, that
Yeah.
was the whole point of the land trust, right?
Yeah.
To create opportunities here.
Yeah, as long as the delay involves vacant properties.
Yeah. Yeah.
We'll follow up on that.
Yeah, if you don't have them sold, you
No,
might as well put them in
no.
there.
We'd certainly do it. I don't know if HUD's going to approve it, just to be clear, but it's their choice.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, are you telling me that the land trust isn't consistent with what HUD?
I'm not telling you that at all, but HUD has disapproved many things I've asked before. That makes perfect sense here. So,
Okay.
Changes one administrator.
yeah,
Fair.
I mean, HUD, like you said, changes depending on administration,
Yeah.
so.
yeah,
But
We can try,
yeah.
yeah,
we should at least,
with the vacant homes.
Yep,
right?
yep,
There you go.
yep. Yep.
Good work.
So could you just give an overview of how we acquired these single-family
Yeah.
homes?
So majority of the housing agency property, for especially all the apartment buildings were built by the housing agency back. Worldview was built 1973. The majority of the other 4 apartment buildings were built, one was built late 70s and the others were in the mid 80s. The single family property, there is quite a variety. And it's the one on the bottom was acquired. The white one right there was acquired by the housing agency. Usually most of these were acquired during the 80s. There were 60 that were built in the 90s and another, I think, 6 or 7 that were built by the housing agency in the 2000s.
Okay.
So
Okay, we built them then.
single family, you have a mismatch of, the problem we've always had historically as a housing agency is you had different floor plans, you had different building materials, you had different finishes inside each of the units. So keeping inventory and the cost upkeep was always very, very difficult because it was every house was different.
Thanks.
Yep. Okay, public housing, just a little bit of numbers. Most of my numbers that you're going to see today were from mid-September, so there's a little bit of a delay. The occupancy rate at the time was 95%. One of the challenges that we do have in public housing is it competes with our Section 8 voucher program. So back in middle of this summer, July, we pulled about 600 families from our waiting list and issued vouchers. There was a large number that came out of our public housing program as a part of that. So specifically, Royal View Manor, 200 units. We had 20 move-outs because they all received their vouchers and took their vouchers and leased somewhere else. So the 95% occupancy rate, a lot of that is due to turnover we had at Royal View. Usually, our elderly buildings are usually pretty well occupied. Royal View is where you have the most turnaround, but I'm only talking it's usually 4 or 5 a month. So the occupancy rate, usually it's more about 96, 97, just to be clear, but it was 95 at the time. Every year we do get a grade from HUD. We got 84 out of 100 on our, what we call our FAS score. That takes into consideration our inspection score, our financial, and our management score. And as you can see, the physical inspections, this is the one where this is very typical. Our manners, usually we usually score pretty high there. The single family homes, what makes it so difficult is when HUD comes and does the inspection annually, there's a lot of things that get out of our control a little bit as far as inside the unit. This last year when HUD came, there's a couple of our homes, they have bunk beds in the bedrooms. They put them in front of the windows, which blocks egress, so that's a serious matter. When we're there during our inspection once a year, we tell them to move it, but obviously we know they move it right back when we leave. Unfortunately, another one had a bunch of smoke detectors that the family took down, and that was reflective of our score on the single-family homes.
You don't need to do this today, but get back to us with just a little context of the 84. How does that compare? Are we in the mid-range, upper quadrant of
I'll
size?
Yeah, we're above average with it. I could give you more of a context with it, though.
Something so we know.
Yep. Okay, Section 8 program. Going to be going through a lot of numbers here, so I apologize. Currently, we have 2,914 vouchers under lease. Of all those vouchers up there, these are the different categories for all the different vouchers we have. So for project-based vouchers, the YMCA, Centralized Shelter and Services, Flats on Six, Libertad, Monarch. The one that's not reflected yet is Alley Landing. That's a contract that we're just probably going to sign this week, so they're not reflected in the numbers here. But those are all vouchers that are tied specifically to the unit. So for example, the YMCA, we have 12 units that receive Section 8 assistance. If the individual moves out, the assistance does stay with the unit. If a tenant does stay there for a year, they are able to take a voucher from our regular pool and use that to move anywhere else in the community, and the voucher still stays with YMCA. So it's still supposed to help the family move, but these are designated in each of these properties. As you can see, we've tried to really help set aside permanent supportive housing units. So a lot of our homeless units are in here. I think 4 out of the 5, and then Alley Landing, that's an additional 8, are all set aside for our homeless. The one exception, Flats on Six, is for youth aging out of foster care. So that's what that population is supposed to support there. Set-asides, which is another big list of vouchers. These are all programs where the housing agency has made application to HUD, and usually these are competitive applications. And so these are vouchers we get for these specific purposes. So Family Unification Program, 100 vouchers for that. We do work with the Department of Human Services, and this is for youth aging out of foster care as well. Veterans Affairs Supportive Housing, VASH. This is veterans that are experiencing homelessness. So this is 185 vouchers. We have another 20 that we should be receiving in the spring. This is a program that works very well in our community. We have a very good partnership with the VA. They do all the case management. We provide the housing assistance to pay for the housing. Nationally, we're recognized very in high regard with this program. We get a lot of calls about it all the time. I get asked to speak to a lot of different groups about it. But I always tell them that it usually comes down to the VA, because the VA has a relationship with all the clients. We just administer the housing assistance. I think fortunately in Polk County, for housing homeless vets, our landlords have really stepped up and helped provide a lot of units for that population. Emergency Housing Voucher Program. This is vouchers that are right out of COVID. We did receive these through a program. These vouchers are for individuals experiencing street homelessness. These vouchers are currently, they put a sunset on them, so they will be being converted to our regular voucher allocation. That's kind of a process we're going through right now. And the last are 53 vouchers that are specifically for non-elderly disabled individuals, which it comprises about 42% of our voucher allocation is for elderly and disabled. So because of that high amount, we were eligible to receive 53 vouchers just for that population. Yep.
Is emergency housing vouchers the same as rapid rehousing?
No. Rapid rehousing is more of a program where individuals that are facing homelessness that they think will only need assistance for like 3 to 6 months. It's kind of that short-term assistance to get them back on their feet. This is long-term assistance. A lot of really set aside for street homelessness.
Sounds the same, but different.
Kinda.
Okay.
Last little category, portability. This is a federal requirement that the vouchers are used all across the country. Currently at this time when we looked at it, we had 48 clients that were living in other communities that we were assisting, and then there are 17 that are living in Des Moines that the other outside agencies are assisting as well.
Of the community, are you saying like in the metro? How many of our Section 8s go to West Des Moines,
Yeah.
Urbandale?
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. I should have mentioned right from the start, and I failed. Section 8 is all of Polk County. So when I say outside, I mean outside of Polk County, coming into Polk County. But to answer your question, roughly 80, and it's dropping. It's been dropping from 80, I think it was 78% of all vouchers are used in Des Moines. The balance is all throughout Polk County. West Des Moines has a good portion of those. Ankeny has been getting a lot more vouchers. Altoona has as well. I could send you a good summary of that though too.
Yeah, I just was curious.
Yeah. Yep. One of the things that kind of added to that, the 2 years, I think it was 2 years ago, HUD changed the way we figure our rents. We used to have one rent amount per bedroom size for all of Polk County. Then they changed it where we had to have different rents based on the fair market rents by each zip code. And there's approximately 55 zip codes all throughout Polk County. So when that change happened, it drove an increase into how much we were spending per family for each of our assistants. So it's more costly for us as a community, probably for the landlord and the tenant. It does give them access to more housing, but that is one big change that happened the last couple of years. Section 8, and I'll... Feds, from the feds. So the way, when you think about Section 8, there's two requirements we have from HUD. We can't use more vouchers than we're given, which is $3,800, and we can't spend more funding than we're given, which is the $22 million amount. So you can't go over $3,800 and you can't spend more money than you have. So the average housing assistance payment is $590, and that's per family per month. That number since 2022 has risen by about $130 per family per month. So that adds up pretty quickly. If we, with that, based on that funding, we could issue 3,126 vouchers. Right now, as I mentioned already, we're at the 2914. The difference there, we have 382 families that are currently out looking. So from that population, I know we're going to get to our numbers where we're at. Why the lag? In June of this year, we received $2 million more, which was a big surprise to all of us. That came due to our increased rental rates over the last couple of years. So HUD looked and said, okay, it's costing you guys a lot more to lease up your units, so we're going to give you more money. So we got a 11% increase that came in June. So since June, called in 600 families off the waiting list, been issuing the vouchers, and we still have 382 that are out looking, and we're just waiting for those to get leased up.
485 clients per case manager?
Yeah, well, it's very heavy.
Kidding me?
Yeah. Yeah, the Section 8 staff, very heavy workload. It can be a bear. We do what we can to limit the number of contacts, make things as efficient as we can, but it's very heavy. Out of the 382 families that are out looking for housing right now, 78% will be successful. That is a rate that has been consistent for probably a decade. That's due to a lot of different factors. A lot of times when you issue vouchers, they could be looking, they want to find a unit in Des Moines. They want to live, on the east side. They want to live in this neighborhood. So if they're looking that narrow, sometimes they can't find an apartment that's available. They can't find a landlord that's willing to lease to them. There's a lot of different factors that go into that percentage. But that 78%, so that 382 number, 3/4 will find a unit, and unfortunately probably 25% won't.
You just tied two numbers together. Are the 382 equivalent to the extra money that we got from HUD this summer? Or is some of those just the, inertia?
They're tied directly to the money. So up until June, we were just dealing with attrition each month. So we lose about 35 families a month, and there's a variety of different reasons. We have elderly and disabled. There's 42% of our population, so we have people pass away. We have people that their income makes them ineligible. We have people that get terminated from the program for not following rules or others. So typically, up until June of last year, we were just dealing with the 35 that we were leaving every month. So we'd issue, let's say 50, I'm not quick on the math, but we'd issue 50 vouchers. We know we'd get 35 that would lease. But then when we got the extra $2 million, that made us call in the 600 that got us to the 382 that are out on the street today, looking for housing.
For good reason, we've been
Yes.
on edge about funding for
Yes.
services, affordability.
Yep.
I have to admit, I'm not quite sure I knew this $2 million came through.
Yep.
When it happens administratively, it's harder for us to track. But like this is, nearly 400 families
Yep.
being able to have assistance. I think it's a chance for us to demonstrate that this is a good place for the federal government to spend money, that we use it effectively and we get to work right away. I'd really encourage a letter from the mayor and the manager, maybe working in conjunction with Jen and our communications team to reach out and let our delegation know exactly where we stand and our appreciation for this, because I think sometimes when and this is true of us as politicians too, when we hear the way it's specifically happening families, and in this case, we have a number, it's 382 people are going to go try and find a place to live with our help and their help. I think it can only help us acquire additional funds from the federal government as they're looking at places that will spend it well.
Because some people
Right.
are using.
Yeah.
Right, already in.
So,
Yeah.
it's more families
Yeah.
that we've helped.
Yeah.
I
I've
didn't
done
know
my-
anything about that.
As the chair of the HCC and MAC, we've written harsh letters to our delegation. This is one where I think we can say a note of appreciation, but use it in a way to say, we use your funds well, help us continue to help your constituents, as a partner of the city. I think that's what we need to say.
We can do that, absolutely. However, I think we should make that in conjunction with the changes to the zip code so that we understand that the project or the program became more expensive. At the same time, they gave us more money.
That's why.
Yeah.
The net benefit is more families, but it's not going to be 400. It'll be something smaller than that. So we can explain that in a letter, share that with council and our legislators.
But it was more than 400 families that have.
Not when you do the math.
Yeah.
It's $600 a month.
They've raised the amount that.
Yeah, the 380 is about 2.5 million of annual funds, so it's a little less.
I'm not sure I'm tracking. We provide each family less that allows our pot to be distributed to more families.
The opposite. We have to use more of the federal funds on the monthly average.
The 590, it wasn't 590
Right.
as a payment.
Because now the federal funds are going to more suburban rental arrangements that are higher per month. And they only pay individually their 30%,
Right.
up to 30% of their own income. So the federal dollars have increased significantly, which is good from a policy because we're spreading the vouchers out across Polk County more. But the rent is more expensive outside of Des Moines. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
They need more money because they raise.
I would expect the number in my head is going to be around 300, but we'll do the math for
I mean,
you.
It's still able to help 300
Yeah.
more
Something-
families with the additional funding.
Because
No
all the
matter
rent's
if the
gone.
rent got raised or not, we're still.
Yeah.
It's a
helping.
positive,
Yes.
It's positive.
So I think that's what,
Yep.
to your
Yep.
point, I think that's
But-
what you're
put 'em
trying to say. And, I mean, we're still helping 300 more families.
No, I don't have a problem with the message at a high level is correct. It's just the numbers aren't quite.
Yeah.
Paying 30% on
I-
top of it.
The families are on top of that.
They didn't hire me for my mess.
That's just our portion. Right.
Chris, perhaps this is a question for another time, but how was the cap at 3,800 vouchers at 22 million established?
I know the funding, I can answer that right away. That's all done through appropriations. So typically what happens is when they look at the budget, either they fund it at this level, then it gets divvied amongst all the different housing agencies across the country. One thing to note, that does not include any of our admin funding. That is straight housing assistance payments. The 3,800 vouchers have come, so one question about selling public housing, we get a voucher for every unit that we do sell. So that 3,800 number, I do have a history of how all those happened that I could send to council, but some are from when we sold public housing, we get a voucher. A lot of them are applied for, but that's how that's happened over time.
Thank you.
But if we don't have the funding for it, I mean, right, so we have 600, I mean, getting additional vouchers doesn't do us a whole lot of good right now if we're
They give us more
sitting
money.
at
Yep.
600 vouchers that we can't
Yep.
use. So for example, if we sold, we sell additional vouchers and get, or additional public housing units.
There's funding that comes with them, but it doesn't equal one for one. You're exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah. Opened the waiting list for 2 days, July, I think it was 10th and 11th. Received 7,501 applications. We do limit the waiting list each time we opened it to right around 4,500. Reason for that is we try to keep the waiting list at about a 2-year time period. So if it gets too long, it gets a little bit more difficult to manage. Just like public housing, there's a HUD grading system that comes with Section 8. I think it's 19 out of the last 20 years we've been a high performer. The one year we did miss was the COVID year. Yeah,
That's huge.
very huge.
Do we know on the waiting list, are they all verified for sure that they are qualified?
No,
Okay.
No.
They're just on they've applied.
they've applied.
Okay.
Yep.
Get a list before and
Yeah.
then they do the lottery and.
Yeah.
I wish that we could find out how many are on our list that are on other housing agencies because.
I agree.
I think there's 1,200 Chicago residents on our list.
Yeah. I could guarantee most of those are on other waiting lists too. One program I don't get the opportunity to talk much about with you is our Family Self-Sufficiency Program. So we do have this for public housing, Section 8. The way the program works is work with family members that voluntarily sign up for the program. They have goals that are established in the program, and for example, if one of them is going back to college, getting a job, as their income increases, the subsidy that is saved by the housing agency gets put into an escrow account, and once they successfully complete the program, the funding that's in that escrow account is given to the family. So for example, in Section 8, if their income increases, they pay more in rent, and then our subsidy goes down. But the difference in our subsidy reduction gets put into a bank account, and when they graduate from the program, that escrow account is given to them. Got a little summary of the balances, but kind of the one things that does happen at our Housing Services Board each month is when they graduate, we present them with checks. The last 3 checks we handed out, one was $6,800, $15,000, and then $21,000. Kind of some of the good stories that happens with this is you get a lot of people that go back to school, go back get a trade school, their job, their salary increases, their income increases. They end up not being able to be in our program anymore. So it's kind of leaving our program. We're able to give them a check, and I know the last one that got the check for $21,000 was used for down payment for a house. So really good story. It's just one I don't get the opportunity to talk too much about. But last slide, upcoming initiatives. Royal View Manor, we have the Section 18 application we'll be working through with the developer. The one item that we did talk about was amending the Section 32 plan. We'll get that part added and look at the amending for the vacant, existing vacant units that are in the program as well to add the Central Iowa Land Trust requirement in there. And also we're involved with Blueprint to End Homelessness. There's 2 initiatives that we're working on with that group right now as well. Any questions?
All right. Honorable Mayor, members of City Council, my name is Steve Neighbor, Des Moines City Engineer, Des Moines resident. Also here with Patrick Bean, our Clean Water Administrator with Public Works. Public Works and Engineering are ecstatic to present this presentation today on our Des Moines Levee Alterations Program. And let me get to the next slide here. Again, I'm going to give a quick overview of the program, the background, history, and then Patrick's going to talk about a lot of stuff we've been working on real recently. And the main point of this presentation, I'm going to say, is to celebrate, update, and educate. Celebrate the amount of work that our mayor, council, and city staff have done over the past 10 years is incredible, to say the least. We're talking about well over $200 million invested in making our neighborhoods safer and much more protected from flood mitigation in a flood mitigation stance. It's incredible. When we talk about the things we've done in Closest Creek, Hamilton Drain, Watershed, and Highland Park and Oak Park, and with the sewer separation project, I vividly remember standing in front yards with you in 2018 in a devastating flood event, and it was a horrible situation, but this council and staff have done what they said they would do, and the amount of money we've invested in the past 10 years is incredible. And this program begins beyond, well before 2018, but we've really ramped it up in the past 10 years. And so I'm proud of that, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about that. When we talk about the levee system, we're talking about the whole system, meaning not just the levees, but the flood walls, the closure structures. When we say closures, openings in the levees, pump stations, and as well as our operation and maintenance that Chad Christensen, Jonathan Gano, and Adam Smith and Patrick Bean all do to keep our levees safe. And so that's what we're talking about here. The levee system was built in the 60s and 70s by the Corps. About 9 miles of it is City of Des Moines levees. It is tied hydraulically with about 7 miles of Corps levees. So when we talk about they're hydraulically linked together, and you'll see that in a graphic in a second here. There were two major flood events that triggered in 93 and 2008 that triggered the Corps to update their flow frequency study, showing that the base flood elevations have increased. In response, the city did some planning work starting in 2011 to how do we respond to that, okay? And then we've been and really in 2019, we started doing the work that was approved by the Corps to alter the levees. And really in 2017, we started actually doing all the work we could from the interior drainage side of things, such as we jacked up the Red River Bridge 4.5 feet, just like a car. We put jacks on the pillars and raised it 4.5 feet to allow more flow to go through it. Won a 2018 American Society of Civil Engineers Award for doing that. We've been replacing our pump stations as well. And so a lot of this interior drainage work to make our neighborhoods safer, McKinley, Columbus Park, the historic East Village, we put detention basins in and did work to make those neighborhoods mitigate flood risks there as well. So we did a lot of the interior drainage work, and then in 2019 really ramped up the work on the levees themselves. And here's kind of a map of the levee system in general. When we talk about in the green DM1 and in the pink Southeast Des Moines levee are hydraulically linked. So we can't just improve our levee, we've got to also look at the Corps' levee as well. And then when we think about the levee system downtown, we've got DM2 and DM3. DM3 protects a lot of the McKinley School, Columbus Park neighborhood. DM2, obviously, the central business district. So, billions of dollars of infrastructure as well as our neighborhoods and thousands and thousands of people that live there. So. We talk about how do we evaluate and accredit levies, and Patrick's going to talk about a newer program that is used to evaluate, and it's kind of a risk-based approach to to target levies. The Federal Emergency Management Agency has a code of regulations that spells out the things that we use to accredit levies, and then we need to look at those criteria, and then we need to have a professional engineer certify that it meets those criteria. And so when we say that. Back in 2009, the city entered into an agreement with FEMA to provisionally accredit the levees. And what that means is FEMA recognizes in the agreement that the levees were accredited. However, with the new flow frequencies, they no longer meet the criteria, but they know that we're working on it, so that they know we're working on the levee system and submitting the documentation to, once we complete those improvements, to certify to them so that they can be shown on the flood insurance rate maps as these are credited levees, and the areas behind them are areas protected by levees instead of being zone A, which is flood zone. Okay, and so there's that accreditation process that FEMA has for the flood insurance rate. That's one component. Obviously, the major component is mitigating flood risk. Okay, and so when we look at accrediting levees based on FEMA, they have a checklist of things. It's 7 chapters of things that we look at, from freeboard, how high is the levee, the embankment protection, foundation stability, sediment, and interior drainage. And I'll show those things here in a graphic in a little bit. And it also includes operation and maintenance. So it's very important to recognize that we benefit substantially by having Chad Christensen and his team working under Jonathan Gano and Adam Smith, who do the work to do the maintenance of those levees to keep them in good shape. So here's a graphic I like that shows this, okay? So when we accredit a levee, it's not just height. So we accredit the levee needs to be at least 3 feet above the base flood elevation, and around bridges, it needs to be about 4 feet. Also, our rivers are prone to scouring, unfortunately, so there's a scour protection component about armoring the levee on the front side, and then there is groundwater seeping underneath the levees. So we've been doing things to mitigate that, meaning we'll do seepage relief trench where we'll draw the water out to reduce the pressure from under the levees so that they don't overtop, or we'll install cutoff walls to actually cut that seepage off so it doesn't create that overtopping effect as well. So those are some of the main components. Again, mentioning the operation and maintenance as well is a huge component of this as well.
Boils. I know at the Birdland,
Yep.
we've got some sand boils over there, and FEMA or Corps of Engineers said, oh, it's fine, don't worry about it. But
The sand boys are a component of exactly of that under seepage, you're correct. And so what we've done is we've done some things where we reduce that pressure, or our public works team can mitigate those sand boils with monitoring them as well. So we kind of attack them in a number of different ways, but that is exactly what is a result of the seepage. Yep. Okay. So again, this slide is, and there's the principal, the new stop log closure at Principal Park. So if you guys were going to, it's getting a little cold for Iowa Cubs games now, but when you're going to Iowa Cubs games, we used to have to bring in contractors to bring in dirt to fill in that gap there, the closure. And that, of course, takes a lot of time, and which time is risk, right, when we're dealing with the levee system. And so now we've got a stop log closure in that place to do that a lot quicker, and also remove it a lot quicker so we can open it back up a lot quicker. So that's an example of a closure there. But again, our goals are, number one, make our, mitigate risk, flood risk, and then number two, we've got to achieve that FEMA accreditation as well. And so it's through a number of different measures here. Of course, yeah.
on tonight's council, the gate over off of George Lake, it was a total of like $2 million, and now we've got change order number 4 that I see was for $500,000.
Yeah.
And when I read the blue letter, it looks like somebody changed some rules after we had. Did something change that now they're making us spend this additional money?
So Patrick's going to talk a little bit about new rules for accreditation, but the floodgate, what happened was we need to drive sheet piles down to essentially the shale and bedrock. And unfortunately, I don't want to, we've had a history with boulders, but there are things impeding the sheet piles to get down to the shale or bedrock. So we've got to build basically a grout injection system at a level above that boulder layer that's blocking these sheet piles to stabilize the sheet pile. So there's not anything we did borings, but the borings are kind of in spots, and it just it's an underground condition we weren't able to find until now, unfortunately. So that's what that change order is. But that is part of this whole flood protection system to make that flood closure, again, used to take us almost all day to put up, and now this will be like a matter of hours to close that gate, to do that one. So because of the size of the program, we've had to do it in phases. And again, this is the phases of the levees. We've already done a lot of work in terms of the pump stations and interior drainage. We've had to do it in phases there. And A, B, and C are all substantially completed. And so right in the heart of our downtown, we've done about a $33 million worth of work to armor those levees from scour protection, from seepage underneath, and raising them above the FEMA standards. In fact, we also made a decision to raise them even higher than the FEMA standards as well, to provide some buffer. So that work is all substantially completed. So here's some examples. We talked about the Principal Park flood wall, the benefits of that. You can see on the left, right, we had to unfortunately our rivers are very prone to scouring, so we did have to armor our banks. And then on the right, you can see examples where we've had to add a flood wall next to our 5th Street Bridge, as well as raising the earthen levees as well. You can see this is an example of, on the left is the Jackson Basin, which we're going to make some improvements to that as well. But in terms of the pump station, we've got a newer pump station there, and then you can see the sheet piling to cut the cutoff walls. And then to the left and right, they're raising the levee You see there's the picture on the right is to the west by Beachy Flats where we've raised the levee. So what we've been doing downtown is meeting, taking the levee systems and meeting all the FEMA criteria, checking every single box on all 7 criteria, regardless of the risk, meaning we check every single box, okay? And we've also the Corps had another standard called the 90%, 100-year 90% conditional exceedance elevation, meaning that when we have a lot of bridges, there's uncertainty in the modeling. And so we want to reach a certainty above the Corps standards and their modeling to make sure we're providing adequate protection. So that's what we've been following for when we've been doing this project. So, and actually we put a buffer in the downtown, we put a buffer in. So, and we're talking about this is how do we improve the levees? And when we think about the Des Moines River Basin and Raccoon Basin, we're talking over 9,000 square miles that drain to this point. Okay, so when it rains in Minnesota, it impacts us. 9,000 square miles come right to the confluence of the river. So that's the standards we've been following. And levee alterations phase D through H. D is our levee. E, F, G, and H is Southeast Des Moines. It's a core levee. We have to improve it, or at least accredit it, because it's connected to the levee that wraps up around right here along City Hall.
So if it's the Corps levy, how much do they pay versus us?
So unfortunately, they're not. We actually did some work about 8 years ago to try and get them to pay for it, and they did a study and they said, well, you do have a robust levee system, so the probability of something happening is low. So we cannot justify the federal interest in spending money to improve the levee. So when we think about Cedar Rapids, right, they did not have a levee. So they basically took the flooding and then applied it to the valuation that it's protecting. In our case, yeah, we're protecting billions in evaluation, but there's a low probability of something happen. So they said no. So again, you have the Corps saying, well, it's low probability, but FEMA says you got to meet these criteria to be accredited. So
basically the city of Des Moines taking on the full amount?
That's correct. Yep. But we do have great news, and Patrick's going to present here on a new standard that we can use to target more of a risk-based approach, which I think is an awesome thing for the city here. So, we're at 30% design of E through G, and that helps a ton in what Patrick's going to talk about in terms of the work, the background work. So, Patrick, ready?
Morning, Honorable Mayor, City Council members. Thanks, Steve, for the intro here. But yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about semi-quantitative risk assessment at a very high level. If you want, the next 2 days, we're actually going to be doing some more of this. If you want to sit through some very intensive discussions with a bunch of Army Corps of Engineer folks, come on over to Public Works and you can have a chat with us, but I would not recommend it. It's very long days. So for the remainder portion of the levees that we haven't constructed yet, you remember a couple years ago we came back and prices went kind of crazy, so we're saying, let's take a look at another process that the Corps has now. So in 2021, they issued a circular that was allowing semi-quantitative risk assessment. So looking at all the different ways the levee can fail and understand, what's the risk from all those different criteria. Moving it towards maybe adding some additional operational and maintenance requirements that are in there, so having very detailed operation manuals and making sure when there is a flooding event going on, we're watching it, monitoring, and making sure we're addressing anything that comes up as it happens. The nice thing with this process, before that, the old process was the only way you could get your levee accredited. Now, the Corps and FEMA have an agreement that says if the Corps approves the levee under this risk assessment process, then FEMA can continue to accredit it. So that was one of the big things for us. If we couldn't get the accreditation, it was pointless, and we kind of had to find the funding to come back and fund all of the other work. So really what was accomplished in this process? We looked at what was the baseline levee condition. How high was it? How wide was it? How much scour protection? How much seepage protection? Everything that was in there. A lot of work had already been done, with the interior drainage. And so we really took a look at the primary failure mode they look at is still overtopping. Where do we have overtopping? So looking at everything from Southeast 14th all the way down through Pleasant Hill and then wrapping up around 4 Mile, we looked at where's the most critical place that could fail. And honestly, we found one, and that one really was between Southeast 14th and Southeast 15th, right by the Animal Rescue League there, that was probably the worst place that we could have a failure. So that one we took a look at, and we raised that up as part of that risk-informed design. The challenge we had with that was, well, now that's no longer the worst place. Where's the next worst place? And that actually pushes it from that phase D from 14th down to the Deans Lake pump station that the headworks of the wastewater treatment plant down to the treatment plant. So we are going to have to do some raises at the treatment plant as well. And that's actually tonight there is a council blue letter approval coming through for some additional funding for that risk-informed design for that looking at around the treatment plant, and that's what the next 2 days are going to be as we're looking through that. So we're going to have to do some sort of raise on phase E as well. Once we're completed with that, the rest of the assessment shows that we're not going to have to deal with any more raises on the remaining phases of the levee through there. We still have to do some other things. There's the closure on 4 Mile where the railroad line that comes in for Mid-American Power on the far east end is actually part of the Southeast Connector project, but that was one of the big questions that Corps kept coming back with because that's one that we have a short turnaround to get that installed. So the new closure is going to be much easier to install, much quicker, and take fewer staff. So we will start, once we get through this process, we will get phases D and E in advance towards finishing design and starting on construction. How does the risk process save money? So it evaluates risk versus that prescriptive design approach. And so looking at the earthen raises, honestly, that's really what a lot of the cost was with this before, because it was hydraulically connected, the old process. Everything had to be raised to that maximum level all along there. This is now looking what's the risk of a failure from overtopping, for that seepage, for scouring, for interior drainage issues, and it says what is the most critical ones of those, and if we address those to a minimum level, then we can actually accredit it. So earthen levees, the geotechnical seepage, and then the savings are we don't have to raise that height on the entire levee system. Riprap's not required on the entire segment. And then some of the seepage relief on the backside is not needed because if we're going to have a failure, it's more likely that it's going to overtop in some of these areas before we have those other types of failures. So the boots and suspenders approach is great, but it's not truly needed when you look at it from the overall functionality of the levee system. So the prescriptive approach we've talked about versus the risk approach, once again, sets the minimum height, the scour, and seepage. Through the process, we evaluated 41 potential failure modes, and that's everything from height along all of it, looking at places where we've had histories of sand boils, where we've had pipe penetrations, where we have other things that make it so it's not just a perfectly height and wide levee system. And we looked at all those and found there were 5 primary risk drivers, most of those being either closures or heights. And we looked at all those through a risk-informed design process and said, where do we really need to get those to in order to get the levee accredited? And so the table here, or the graphic here, is kind of showing that a little bit. The red is where we're at right now. We were really close under the risk process to just get it out straight accredited after we completed the first round of risk assessments. But there were those 5 critical primary risk drivers that we found that we really needed to take a closer look at and said, we probably need to put some money into these, primarily in those phase D and E, Southeast 14th, and then along the wastewater treatment plant. So once we're completed with that work, we can go from that red, kind of that inconclusive, no recommendations, kind of that gray area is like, well, maybe, maybe not if it meets certain criteria, into that green area so that the Corps can recommend accreditation. So that's where we're trying to get to. The nice thing with this also builds some resiliency into it because we really understand the risks and failure modes within the levee system itself. So a lot of this the information taken from all of this background research, because a lot of what we're looking at is old plans, old geotech reports. We're looking at any pictures we have of anything for the past 20, 30 years that's happened on the levee when we've had a flood event. Where have we had sand boils? Where have we had other things that have happened that we've addressed without a failure, and use those to identify where would we truly need to focus the work on the levee. And so with that process, we're actually building resiliency into it. Whereas, downtown, we said, here's the minimum elevation and we're going above that. Here, we're building resiliency by understanding that risk and then mitigating those critical ones to make sure that we have a well-functioning levee system that protects all the properties behind it. So the big thing we really wanted to talk about here, remember I talked about in the beginning, 2019, we had about $65 million program budget for this, for all the phases, for the pump stations and everything there. 2023, we came back and we're like, uh-oh, we really got into the design and it jumped $34 million. Mostly because there was a lot more things that have been identified from the very preliminary design work that was done to that 30% design. And so we're not quite sure what to do. And that's when we came back and asked for additional funding to start this semi-quantitative risk assessment process with the Corps, because otherwise we'd have had to find this funding elsewhere. Primarily would have come from the stormwater utility funds. We'd actually utilized all of the flood mitigation grants in the first round of all this work, and we weren't quite sure we were going to get the rest of the funding. Today, after going through this process and looking at the highlighted yellow column, we're going from about $100 million down to $66 million. And that's primarily in those savings we talked about. We don't have to raise the entire levee to this set height. We're moving some of the scour protection and some of the seepage protection on the backside because they're not the primary risk drivers for failure of the levee. So we are still addressing those areas through operational and maintenance tasks that we're going to be doing, but we're able to reduce those. So you can kind of see in the phase D, so the southeast 14 to the beginning of the plant, we're about $5 million reduction. The big one that blew up on us last time from phase E, we went from $3 million to $22 million, and now we're back down to $7 million. So there's still a substantial amount of work that needs to be done around the treatment plant, but it's a more targeted, reasonable approach to actually address those issues. And then F, G, and H, the $800,000 shown there, is what's already been spent on the engineering costs to get it to that 30% design. This does not include the funding that was included in the Southeast Connector. That was part of the grant funding because we had to relocate that with the roadway project. So ultimately, the $700,000 that we spent so far on the risk assessment with the Corps has led to about a $32 million savings for the whole system that we will still be able to get accredited when we're done with this process. The other thing with this, when talking through the Corps, once you start the risk assessment process, we kind of have levees done under two different systems. We have the old prescriptive design process that did phases or A, B, and C, so portion of DM1, DM2, and DM3, that those were designed under that. We also have RR1, which is basically south of Waterworks Park. It protects George Flagg and Bell Ave west of Fleur. That's another one that we are wanting to take a look at through the risk assessment process and get everything, kind of the initial assessment completed there. Because after going through this a couple times, with the Birdland levee, which Linda, I know you brought up, that we went through that process as well, where we said we need to do all this, and after looking at those risks, it was like, we don't have to do anything right now. Maybe in the future we might, but we looked at what's the primary way it's going to fail, and overtopping will happen significantly sooner than we have, the seepage failure on the backside. So there's not a lot of point in putting in trench relief drains on the back if overtopping is there. It also then adds another way that it can fail that didn't exist before. If you're not operating and maintaining those wells appropriately, that is a place that can also lead to failure sooner than without having them.
I know this doesn't really matter, but in '93, when the levee breached at Birdland,
yes,
was that because of why did it break? Do you remember? Anybody? It doesn't matter, but
some of the 93 flood, quite frankly, I think happened from issues at closures and then at gate wells. We have a number of levee penetrations, and then the gate wells failed, and so then it came through that way. But Berlin at that point was, I'm not sure it was even accredited then, or certified then. It was not in good condition, so it's been rebuilt.
Yeah.
So you're right. It was not, when they rebuilt it, it was not an accredited levee. So yeah.
I think some of it was also where the river changes, it takes a bend through there. I think there wasn't enough protection in that critical
Something
point. So
agreed.
I think that point there, it caused some scour, it caused some failure, and then I think that was the primary place where the failure started. But yes, there were several things that contributed to that one when it occurred. Having it accredited kind of sets everything's at a minimum requirement so that it is at that point. So that's the standard we're working towards right now. So I bring up RR1, DM2, and DM3 in that we are probably going to be coming back and asking for some additional funding to go through the SQRA process with those, because then that syncs everything up. So at every 10 years, the Corps is going to come back and take a look at those. And there's a high value for doing that, because as we're working through this process, like I said, there's a lot of looking at old plans, at old pictures, knowledge for staff members that actually were contributing. What did you see? What did you remember? Where did we have failures? Where did we have flooding? Where did things happen when they occurred in the past? And the further we get away from that, people retire, those documents don't get saved appropriately because they don't seem like they're probably that important. Pictures of, a little flooding from 25 years ago, is that something that's critical to most people? No, but when you're working through the process, it is a key piece of kind of building that picture of understanding that risk. So in the future, we're probably going to be coming back and looking at, another $300,000 to $500,000 for doing the SQRA for those. Those would be with the Corps themselves. And those would also be accepted by FEMA for reaccreditation in the future. Final slide. So as of right now, staff's recommending extending the levee design assessment to the Corps. That's what we're coming to tonight. That extension is another $139,000 to finish the risk process for the remaining phases of the current levee program. After that, we will complete the design and construction on phases D and E after permitting. As you know, that takes a little time with that. Bidding D and E, and then once all of that work is done, certifying the levees through accreditation application with FEMA, all with the goal to be completed by approximately 2019 is still, or 2029, sorry. So that's what we're working towards right now. Yes.
So in the next construction season.
Yep.
The levee work between East 14th and downstream from there, what section is that?
That's phase D.
D?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's going to be, that'd be the south bank of the Des Moines River in that area.
There's just a little bit on the south bank. It's primarily on the north bank.
Okay. So I'm a little confused about the trail that runs through there was recently resurfaced in the last 2 or 3 weeks, but that's supposed to be closed next year. Won't the contractors tear that up, the new trail that was just done?
Well, we'll have to take a look at that. We're not impacting the entire levee segment through there. The primary section is going to be between 14th and 15th, so the very west end of that. And so I don't think the trail is right there. That was the one that we'd been talking about with the levee, putting the trail underneath the bridge and then back up onto it with the Icon Water Trails access point there, which hasn't been done because we knew we were going to have to do some work there in the future. Also that the roadway over the levee there for the water trails access. But we will have to assess that. I don't know exactly how far we're going to have to be doing the raises in there yet. That's where we're going to finish up the risk-informed design and get to the final design for that. I guess, do you have any other?
Oh, you're right.
Well, there are just some questions in the community. Why did they resurface the trail if it's going to be torn up the next year? So,
I mean, it probably won't be next year. Next year will be design and working through permitting. The earliest would be 2027 we'd start construction. So there'll be a little time there, but sometimes trying to get everything synced up with these can be a challenge. And so should we have held off on it? Maybe. I think based off what we're doing right now, I think it's unlikely that we're going to be impacting the entire piece that's been redone and maybe a section of it.
Okay.
Okay, anything else? If not, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And we will end our work session. We reconvene for a closed session at 4 o'clock. Our regular meeting will be at 5 o'clock, so we will see everybody back here. Thank you.